In the depths of Richmond Palace, on a cold March morning in 1603, the air tasted of vinegar, dead flowers, and the sour sweat of courtiers who had kept vigil for weeks. Physicians had tried everything a Tudor court could offer: purges, potions, heated stones, leeches, whispered prayers, and none of it could stop the slow extinguishing of the most famous woman in England. Beyond the shuttered windows, the kingdom waited for a breath that would not return. Because the queen was not only a person, she was the pin-holding rival faiths, hungry nobles, and foreign enemies in a tense balance. In her private rooms, as officials inventoried her belongings with careful hands, a sealed letter was found among the papers. It was read, then immediately locked away. Whatever was written there, it threatened to turn a dignified death into something uglier, a final accusation against the court, and perhaps against the queen herself. In that moment, even the strongest men in the room understood that royal deaths were never simple endings. They were evidence, and evidence could be dangerous. Welcome to Medieval Spirits, and if you like history told like an autopsy, tap like, subscribe, and ring the bell. Today, we peel back the layers of white paint and royal myth to reveal the rot beneath the Tudor mask. We will walk the corridors of a court that survived on fear, examine the chemistry of beauty that promised salvation and delivered sickness, and follow Elizabeth into the last years when the image of Gloriana became a prison she could not escape. This is not the story of pearls and pageantry. This is the story of a ruler who learned that looking powerful could be as important as being powerful, and who may have paid for that lesson with her own body. Keep your eyes on the small details, the jars, the rituals, the portraits, because in Elizabeth's court, small details were how power hid its violence. Elizabeth's path to the throne was soaked in blood long before she could understand the meaning of the word. Born to Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn, she entered a Europe that treated her as a scandal, a bargaining chip, and a potential heretic depending on who held the pen. Henry's hunger for a male heir had already ripped England from the Catholic Church and plunged the kingdom into religious violence, confiscations, and rebellions. From the beginning, Elizabeth learned that a monarch's body was political property. If your image cracked, your enemies saw an opening. And in the Tudor world, openings were filled with knives. She would spend her whole life managing that property, polishing it when she could, hiding its cracks when she could not, and punishing anyone who tried to claim ownership of it. Elizabeth's first lesson in survival arrived when she was still a toddler, and it came disguised as justice. The Tudor court destroyed Anne Boleyn in slow motion, stripping her of titles, rewriting her as an adulteress and traitor, and turning former friends into witnesses for the prosecution. Even the paperwork was part of the cruelty. The marriage declared invalid. The child declared a bastard. The past rewritten so the king could look clean. Power did not merely kill in this court. It erased, edited, and relabeled, then demanded everyone applaud the new story. On May 19, Etienne Wu Saint-Charlot, Anne Boleyn was led to the scaffold at the Tower of London. Henry ordered a French swordsman, prized for skill and speed, and the blade ended Anne's life with a single, clean stroke that looked merciful only because the politics had been so merciless. Elizabeth, not yet 3, became motherless. declared illegitimate, and pushed out of the sunlight of court. She grew up watching doors close doors to affection, doors to safety, doors to any illusion that family could shield her from power. If a king could destroy the mother he once adored, what did that make love worth in a palace? Even the household that raised her could be rearranged overnight. Servants dismissed, rooms reassigned, childhood stripped away like a title. So Elizabeth learned to become unreadable. She buried herself in study, mastering Latin, Greek, French, and Italian, building a mind that could not be cornered as easily as a body could. She learned to display piety without surrendering private doubts, and to speak in ways that sounded warm while revealing nothing. Those skills saved her later. When Henry died and the kingdom lurched through Edward VI's Protestant reforms and Mary VI's Catholic reaction. Under Mary, Elizabeth was questioned, watched, and at times confined, forced to practice survival in its purest form, say, look harmless, and never let anyone see how afraid you are. She survived by becoming a mirror for other people's expectations, because mirrors can reflect without confessing. When Elizabeth finally reached the throne, power did not free her from suspicion, it intensified it. A queen without a husband was treated as unstable. A queen with a husband would be treated as owned. And a queen who refused both options became a threat to everyone who wanted to control the succession. Parliament petitioned her to marry as if marriage was national defense policy, and the petitions carried an accusation: if you do not give us an heir, you are endangering the realm. Foreign ambassadors delivered proposals dressed as compliments, and every compliment carried a knife, because every court in Europe wanted England tied down, softened, and predictable. The more she delayed, the more everyone projected their hopes onto her body, and the more her face became a battleground. The moment that cracked her armor came in October 1562. Smallpox swept through Hampton Court like a silent assassin. And for days the young queen lay burning with fever while ministers whispered about who would replace her if she died. In a monarchy, illness is not private. It is a national emergency with paperwork. The disease itself was violent blistering, scabbing, swelling, and a stench of sickness that clung to sheets and curtains. Courtiers were kept at a distance, not out of respect, but out of fear. And in the corridors, the question was not only whether Elizabeth would live, but whether the fragile religious settlement she built would survive her. When the fever peaked, they even discussed who would control her household if she lingered alive but broken. Because weakness invites caretakers who are really captors. Elizabeth survived, but survival came with a price that felt political as much as physical. The illness left deep pockmarks across her cheeks and forehead, scars that could not be negotiated away. For Elizabeth, the loss struck deeper than vanity. Beauty had been a tool of rule, a weapon she could wield without ordering executions. It let her play marriage negotiations without ever surrendering her freedom, keeping princes and parliaments suspended in hope. And it helped her project youth in a world that equated youth with strength. After smallpox, she avoided mirrors for a time, then returned to them with desperate intensity, searching for a way to restore the face that the court expected. In the glow of candlelight, cosmetics could turn scars into shadows, and shadows into smoothness. The temptation was not just to look better, It was to look unbreakable. The years after her illness reshaped the queen's mornings into ritual. Courtiers noticed how long preparations took, how fiercely Elizabeth protected the version of herself the public was allowed to see, and how quickly a careless glance could earn a rebuke. This is when she embraced Venetian ceruse, a cosmetic made from white lead mixed with vinegar, prized for producing a pale, smooth complexion that could hide nearly anything. The paler the face, the higher the rank. That was the logic of the era. A visible proof that you did not labor in the sun. For a queen whose authority depended on perception, the pale mask was not fashion. It was strategy. Once the routine began, it set the tempo of the court itself, because audiences could not see the queen until the mask was complete. The application was meticulous and theatrical. Ladies in waiting built her face in layers, spreading ceruse across skin, letting it set, then adding more coats until the surface looked flawless. Ceruse could dry like plaster, forming a shell that reflected candlelight in a way ordinary skin could not. It could also crack if the face moved too much, forcing constant repairs and touch-ups throughout the day. Over that white base came pigments to restore life rouge for cheeks, color for lips, dark kohl to sharpen the eyes, and delicate touches to sculpt the illusion of youth. The routine could take hours, and it was treated like statecraft, because foreign envoys judged her before she spoke a word. A queen who looked ageless looked stable. A queen who looked stable looked safe to ally with. It was beauty engineered under pressure, but lead does not disappear like powder. It accumulates. Modern toxicology recognizes chronic lead exposure as slow sabotage. It can damage nerves, disturb the gut, weaken bones, and cloud the mind. It can cause fatigue that feels like age, headaches that feel like stress, and irritability that looks like temperament. It can also harm skin and hair, creating the cruel need for even more concealment. Every day the mask was built, the metal had another chance to enter her body, settle into tissue, and remain. Elizabeth traded scarred truth for painted authority, and the bargain was vicious. The face that defended her public power may have been poisoning her in private, drop by drop, until the cost became inseparable from her identity. A slow poison is terrifying precisely because it lets you function while it destroys you. At first, the deception worked too well to abandon. The thicker the ceruse, the less anyone could see the damage beneath, and the more securely Elizabeth could believe she had kept her authority intact. Over time, the makeup stopped being a choice and became a dependency. A private ceremony that had to happen before the public ceremony of rule. Without it, she feared she would reveal weakness to rivals, mockery to subjects, and opportunity to conspirators. In a court where spies were paid in whispers and careers were built on insinuation, vulnerability was dangerous. So the mask stayed. And with each year, it became harder to remember where the queen ended and the performance began. Chronic lead poisoning rarely announces itself with a single dramatic collapse. It creeps. Irritability, headaches, stomach pain, fatigue, tremors, confusion, memory slips, symptoms that can be blamed on politics until they cannot. Courtiers explained the queen's sharper temper as the burden of rule, the pressure of plots, the weight of age, and those pressures were real rebellions at home, threats from Spain abroad, and constant whispers about Mary, Queen of Scots, whose existence made every Catholic rumor feel lethal. But the overlap is unsettling. The same years when the mask became thicker were also the years when observers described moods that shifted too quickly, rages that flared too hot, and exhaustion that sank too deep. If the poison was doing its work, it would have looked like personality, not illness, which made it easier to ignore. If lead was contributing, it would have blended perfectly into the noise of politics. Portraits became another wall in the prison. Elizabeth increasingly controlled how she was depicted, insisting on images that presented a smooth, youthful face and calm authority regardless of her real condition. The mask of youth look became official policy, repeated across paintings and medals like a stamped coin, so that subjects in far villages could believe their queen was timeless. Realistic signs of aging were softened or erased, and artists were pushed to paint the idea of Elizabeth rather than the woman. The propaganda worked because it answered a national hunger. England wanted a steady symbol in an unstable age, but the symbol demanded maintenance, and maintenance demanded more paint, more secrecy, and more distance between the monarch and anything resembling truth. As Elizabeth grew older, maintaining the illusion demanded more labor, more time, and likely more danger. Skin suffocated under heavy cosmetics can discolor and thin, and the response at court was often to add layers, not remove them. Visitors began to describe a face that looked rigid, almost carved, beautiful from a respectful distance and unsettling up close. Makeup that cracks must be repaired. A mask that flakes must be patched. Touch-ups became part of the day's choreography, because the queen could not afford a public moment where the illusion failed and the scars beneath reappeared. The cost was not only physical, it was financial and political. Fine cosmetics were imported, pigments sourced from far away, and the ritual was treated as state business because the monarch's appearance shaped diplomacy. The queen's attendants became specialists, trusted not only with her comfort, but with the stability of her image, because one careless hand could ruin the surface that held the myth together. Advisors are said to have urged caution as stories circulated about fashionable cosmetics harming other noblewomen. But Elizabeth's situation was uniquely trapped. She believed she could not appear before subjects or foreign envoys without her face, and those around her benefited from keeping that belief alive. An aging queen without an heir was already a threat to stability. An aging queen who looked fragile was a temptation. In a sense, the court ensured itself against the shock of mortality by repainting it every morning. This is how performance becomes prison. Court etiquette protected the illusion-flattering lighting, careful distance, controlled access, and a culture that discouraged anyone from staring too long. The royal progresses. Those grand tours where Elizabeth showed herself to the nation became stages where every angle mattered. Costumi, jewels, and paint worked together as armor, so that even when her body tired, the symbols stayed sharp. Whether or not every later rumor about trick mirrors is true, the broader reality stands. Elizabeth lived inside a curated world where the icon had to remain immaculate, even as the human underneath aged, hurt, and weakened. The crown did not rest on her head. It rested on her face. The nation saw a goddess. The palace saw the scaffolding holding the goddess upright. By the 1,580 seconds, and 1,590 seconds. Witnesses described a ruler who could be brilliant one moment and volatile the next. Her temper, once a calculated instrument of command, sometimes erupted with a rawness that frightened seasoned ministers. She could lash out, then fall into icy silence, then fixate on betrayals real or imagined. Chronic lead exposure can intensify anxiety and aggression, and it can cloud judgment. And while politics alone can produce the same behavior, the overlap is hard to ignore. In the last decade of her reign, the court also grew emptier. Friends died. Favorites fell. The queen, once surrounded by a glittering circle, began to feel like the last figure on a stage after the audience has gone. The court had always been loud, but late in her reign, the silence between outbursts felt heavier than the outbursts themselves. The daily act of applying ceruse became a kind of punishment she could not escape. It could sting and burn on damaged skin. Thick layers could feel heavy, stiffening expression and turning the face into something closer to plaster than flesh. Touch-ups throughout the day reminded everyone that the illusion was fragile, and that fragility made the queen more controlling, not less. The logic became cruelly circular. Damage required concealment. Concealment caused more damage. And the queen grew more terrified of the moment when the mask might fail in public. Even her famous smile, once described as radiant, risked becoming a crack in the plaster. Desperation invites experiments. Tudor medicine mixed early observation with superstition, and courtiers recommended remedies without understanding the toxins involved. Harsh ointments, mercury compounds, and bizarre anti-aging treatments entered the routine, each one adding another hazard to an already strained body. Foreign ambassadors reported trembling hands and moments when speech or memory seemed to slip. Some noted an eerie, waxen quality to her appearance, a face that looked more like a portrait than a living person. Underneath the symbolism, a body was failing, and the court, trained to survive by pretending, kept applauding the image while the woman inside it thinned. To those who depended on her, admitting decline would have meant admitting the end. In Elizabeth's final weeks at Richmond, the mask could not stop time. She withdrew from the court, refused comfort, and drifted between stubborn clarity and exhaustion. Some accounts describe her pacing for hours, refusing to lie down, as if sleep itself felt like surrender, and refusing food as if even appetite had become a political weakness. The court watched in the way courts always watch, silently, calculatingly, already thinking about the next reign. When she died in March 1603, the machinery of succession started moving at once, because a kingdom cannot pause for grief. An icon could be mourned, but power had to transfer. And the people closest to her knew that uncertainty kills faster than any toxin. In the hours after her death, messengers rota, doors were barred, and plans that had been quietly rehearsed for years became suddenly real. Among the papers gathered after her death, later stories claim, was a letter that the new regime did not want discussed. In some versions, it reads like confession, an admission that Elizabeth suspected her cosmetics were harming her, yet could not stop without destroying the image that protected her authority. In other versions, it hints at something darker that suppliers and courtiers may have encouraged the habit, quietly aware of the danger. Because a queen trapped by insecurity is easier to steer. The precise truth is difficult to prove. Courts generate rumors the way fireplaces generate smoke, and every new reign has reasons to simplify the story of the last one. But the idea persists because it matches the logic of power if a ruler can be controlled through fear. She can be controlled without chains, and vanity can become a leash as strong as iron. Elizabeth's reign ended with an icon intact and a body spent. The public myth survived because England needed it, and the private cost was easy to bury because it complicated the story the nation wanted to tell about itself. This is medieval spirits. We dig up the bones of history to find what was hidden under the paint. Remember the warning Elizabeth leaves behind. Power can demand a mask, but a mask always demands a price. Sometimes that price is paid in lead and silence. Sometimes it is paid in loneliness, in paranoia, in the slow loss of the self behind the face, and when the cheering stops, all that remains is what was always there, a human being, exhausted, with poison in the bones, and a letter no one wanted to read out loud.